Hi HR Nation, it's Chris Rainey. Welcome to HR Leaders, the show where we interview today's most successful and innovative HR practitioners 5 days a week. Today's guest is Esther Bogenaar. Esther is the Vice President of HR Data and Analytics at Shell. Esther, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. Esther, fill in the gaps. Tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and your journey to becoming the Vice President of HR Data Analytics at Shell.
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me here in the show. And so my background is very much in analytics. So I did my educations in applied math and had various roles all in the analytics space. In Shell, I had a career of 8 years before I came to HR in optimizing refineries from analysis of the data of Shell scenarios on forecasting energy supply and demand in long times ahead. And then about 4 years back, I was asked to join HR, and I think that was a surprise. I'd never considered that move, but I took the opportunity, and I'm very much enjoying it. So that's
Fantastic.
where I come from.
So how long have you been with the business now then?
So in Shell, so that's 13 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's a long time. But in Shell, that's actually, baby steps. Typically,
it's true,
since
actually.
I analyze the data, I know that most people actually stay much longer. So
I have noticed that over my career that within Shell that most senior leaders have been there a very long time. So they're definitely doing something right to keep you guys engaged and challenged for a long period. So where we are right now in your career, what's really occupying your mind on a day-to-day basis?
So my job and what I like best to do is to create value from data. So we've got access to a fantastic source of data, HR data in principle, but we connect that to other data sources to actually find value in the data. So do we understand what makes people perform? Can we create business value by advising on the policies we have in place in HR to actually make people perform better in their job? So it's around creating better quality decisions based on analysis of the data or reporting of the data. So it's impact, basically. If I had to summarize it in one word, it's the impact on the that we can have on Shell as a business that occupies my mind, and that has many shapes and forms. To be honest, yeah.
No, I can imagine. I'm sure you've had many over your career. You've had many interesting projects and transformations that you've led and you've been through. But could you share one project or with our listeners that you're most proud of, or that sort of stands out to you?
Yeah, I think it would be our work that we've done on leadership. So we have spend a lot of time in understanding how leadership impacts people in the organization. So I'm talking about team leaders in mostly, but also more senior leaders, how they actually have an effect on the individuals in the organization, on their motivation, on how they manage to engage their teams, how they actually improve performance of a team. And that is something where we did good work on providing insights, basically putting things on the agenda, prioritizing it by showing how big the effects were. And I think that's probably one of the areas with biggest impact that we had in the organization, and still ongoing. So basically every time we learn something new, or we have new ideas, and that's where we like to play. Yeah.
For other HR leaders that are quite new to this journey, because obviously you guys are quite advanced done that, or advanced in comparison to many others, I think. What advice would you give to other leaders that are starting that journey and having a look into that area?
Yeah, I've said it a few times before. I think I think it's important to understand what you want and how you can best get it. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you do everything yourself, right? So I think HR should open up to expertise from outside HR. So especially in the analytics space, and maybe I'm biased in my statements here, but I think that there is a lot of good people who can actually help out, and there's a few things they need to know about HR, but then they can actually contribute a lot. And I think that's the way we've done it, and that's why I'm saying I'm biased, because it seems to work. But I think you can also find that in other companies that typically they if you combine the strengths of HR professionals with analytical professionals or reporting specialists, then you actually get the best of both worlds, and that's what I would advise. So I would say understand what your priorities are, start with the questions that you need answers to, do some pre-work, and then go off and find someone who can actually crack the data for you. And that seems to work very well for us. The other element of what is absolutely necessary to be successful is that you have some senior sponsorship. For us, we clearly have senior sponsorship, so through my line, but actually that has helped to put things that were against the intuition that was in place before, to help put that on the table at the right moments, at the right table, I would say. Yeah.
What are some of the things I'm glad you brought that point up, because that is a big challenge for many of the members, is getting that sponsorship and getting that buy-in. Any advice there that you could give of how you've effectively communicated that to the leadership team to get the buy-in?
Well, you need to have someone who is receptive to that message, right? Or is receptive to the fact that there is some information hidden in the data that you haven't seen before. And the advice I would say is you would do perhaps some complex analytics, but the way you present it is very much solution oriented, right? So when we finish or finalize a piece of work, it's not complicated to understand. We help a lot in filtering the insights that are relevant. We test that with 1 or 2 people, and only then we release it. So it should be something that is very, and when I say easy to understand, I don't mean that people can't understand complex things, but I think
I'm with you.
Skip the stats and just give the insights and give advice on how it can drive change, or how it can what people can do in their area of expertise to actually make impact.
Yeah. Is that something you've learned from your own experience, or have you seen that other companies have done that in the past, where they've overcomplicated the message?
I see people's good work being rejected because of that in the past. So before I joined HR, so it's one thing what I've always tried to do in my job, and I actually like to teach, right? As in, I like to simplify a message, or to bring it across. So and it's just experience of being successful when you actually manage to explain it in the language that people understand, right?
Mm-hmm. Across the broad spectrum of HR tech and analytics is a bit of a minefield for many generalists. So much going on, and they don't really know where to keep up, how to keep up. What's something around HR tech and analytics that HR practitioners, as you know, a lot of our listeners are very senior HR practitioners, what are some of the things that they need to pay more attention to when there's so much going on? What are the specifics you feel that they should pay more attention to, and rather than getting lost in the whole space that it is?
Yeah, I think so. You're right. Like, people get lost, and it's also because it's not around. It's also around not putting attention to certain things, right? So there is a lot of hype around it, and I feel that a lot of the products that are offered aren't yet delivering what they promise, right? So there, it is indeed a minefield, as in people present as if they can do analytics for you, fully automated, and you don't need to worry about anything.
That's basically what happens.
Yeah, but as soon as you start to ask questions, actually, or when we've done a bit of testing in certain areas, it's I don't believe in that message. It doesn't exist yet. I have not seen a product that is automatically doing advanced analytics. So typically it ends up with probably with some frustration around how long it's taking, or that actually in the end you have a cleaned up data set and some reporting, but not yet analytics. So I think you should also step back and see what is truth and what is basically a good sales pitch.
Yeah.
And what you should put attention to is that actually solving an issue that you have, right? A lot of the talk is around about the automated analytics is around predicting attrition. Do you actually have an attrition issue in the company? And otherwise, why the hell would you like to predict it? And if it's doing something in the recruitment space, what is important for you in recruitment? And does this solution actually solve that issue? And I think there's a lot of woolly talk around it, which isn't necessarily helping you and your problem. So that's so I think if you have data, you need to start up sort of professional reporting, and in parallel you can start predictive analytics if you want, but the reporting is where the high demand is. You need to fix that. And the predictive analytics is more something that is of strategic nature. So where are you going to really make changes to the to your HR strategy, policy? Where do you want to make a difference? And so it's around selecting the right questions, and it's around providing answers that typically are going to lead to a lot of discussion rather than simple
Yes.
what we do next. Yeah,
I think you said it right earlier, where people seem just to be jumping on it just for the sake of it, rather than going, do we actually have a need for this specific area, and then working backwards that way? Whereas it seems that actually is working the other way around, which is pretty crazy to think about it. Are there any other questions that you could recommend that they could ask when being approached by these organizations, or when they're looking to embed one of these softwares? What other questions would you ask to ensure that it's the right fit?
I think for us, issues around data privacy and whether they have things in order global, but that's different for different companies. As in, like, you may not have a global presence. I think data privacy in Europe is important for everyone. Maybe in the US,
just about to get more difficult too.
Yeah, and I think we can be successful because it's arranged for. We don't have to worry about that too much, to be honest. So it is arranged for in our systems. So those are the things that need to be. And it would be a showstopper if we wanted to implement a tool that doesn't take care of these things. We will not go ahead. So I think it's something that needs to be considered, and that can actually get you in big trouble if you wouldn't. And the same for predicting things that might be biased, right? In the recruitment space, where you would actually, a lot of the new cool stuff actually has implemented certain biases against, the easiest to mention is a gender bias because of different language, but there's multiple other ones. Those are the things you need to basically investigate before you even start to track. If the people haven't thought of that, don't even bother because fixing it is going to be a lot of work.
Yeah. One of the other things which comes up, which I'm not sure if you've experienced this at all, is I'm sure you have actually, is the integration of these solutions with their current softwares that they use, whether it's SuccessFactors, etc. Any advice there? Because I think what I found at some of the meetings when we bring this up is that people were bringing all these great new tools and technologies, and then they realized that actually we now have 10 different systems we're now reporting to, that we're having to get all of this information and then manually. So they're going back to a manual process, even though they've invested in 3 or 4 new software tools. Any advice in terms of that area? Because it seems that there are a few companies that have a monopoly, in this area. And it seems to be a big headache for the members of, which tools do we use? This one has the greatest solution, but it may not integrate with what we have in place at the moment.
I would separate reporting from analytics here. So the tools are quite good in reporting, and I think that's something you would need to, if you bought a tool and you can't make reporting work, or then that's something you need to fix because that's basically what you pay for.
Yeah.
But the analytics, we do it offline. We don't do it in these tools. As I said before, I don't think they provide yet the analytics at the level that we do it. If there is any analytics, it's typically around very simple topics like attrition, which is an easy one to predict. And it doesn't go beyond. So we actually extract the data and do it offline, if you like. And that is fine if you have the right questions selected, and there it's basically just a few. There is not an issue, because also I think before you make a model operational, which would be the next step, there is a lot of testing to happen. Sorry, that's probably not English, but
No, it makes sense.
You need to do a lot of testing before you can put it online anyway. So you wouldn't
Sure.
want to test out these things in an online system. I think that would be my approach. But
yeah, makes sense. As I said, I think it's such a new area for everyone as well, that I think mistakes are being made along the journey, which is natural. But some of these can be very costly mistakes and have a huge impact. You know, actually work the opposite way. Instead of actually speeding things up, it's actually seeming to slow people down and go the other direction as well. Moving forward, I think obviously what I'm seeing now is I feel that we're kind of at the beginning of this journey on the impact and value that HR analytics brings to HR. Where do you see this going moving forward, and what effect do you feel HR technology will have moving forward in the future?
I think HR technology, well, what's technology we can discuss as well, but it will have a big impact. I think only now we open up the databases, and basically when you start doing that, there is always a need for more data, more insights, more. I think we start providing senior management with, like in HR, but also outside HR, with the insights that we can draw from the data. So for instance, going back to my example of leadership, of course, leadership has been a topic of interest to a company like Shell for decades, and we have developed various solutions, but they were mostly belief and intuition based, and we have delivered some good leadership models, other maybe not so good, but now we can actually show what works, what doesn't work, and that makes the quality of the next leadership model probably better, because we have more information around that, and we can actually solve a problem in the organization if it exists around leadership. And I think opening up that box of insights will only lead to more, and actually the demand to date comes mostly from the HR organization, as they now ask us a lot for insights. But I think in the future, probably the business will get very interested in demanding insights from, hey, actually, can you help me here with my business problem? Do you know who I should promote to a leader, or do you understand why this team doesn't function the way I had hoped for, because I thought I recruited star players, but it doesn't seem to pay off. And I think that's where it's probably going. That's not giving an answer to the technology one, but I think the technology for me doesn't really matter. I think it's a tool that can help and facilitate, and there is many shapes and forms, but and some products are better than others, but I think we will see a lot of development in that space, and then probably a lot of new tools coming up, other ones losing market share. But I think let's see what happens. But I think the tooling and the way we can actually access the data and analyze it will make a huge difference in the coming decades.
Yeah. How far do you think we are away from that transition that you just mentioned before? Because I think everyone's promising that we're already there, and I think you're right, we're not. You know, a lot of companies are promising that this is already what we can do. We can tell you when this person's going to leave. We can tell you this who to promote. That seems to be the message now, right? You know, around it. How far do you think that we really are away from that?
I find it difficult to answer. So I live in my own bubble, which is a large,
based on your experience, of course.
Yeah, but it's a large multinational, and we have certain things in place. And I don't know how it looks in. Well, I have limited understanding how it looks in different in areas or different industries. But I think, it's probably there's this rule of thumb or something that it takes a decade to make new technology work, right? So if we go by that, this technologies exist now for a couple of years, so maybe it's taking another 8.
Sure. Do you think it's more prediction
here?
No, of course. Do you think it's more of a cultural shift, because it seems that the technology is almost here, but
It's
perhaps
both. It's
both.
both.
Okay,
Yeah,
it's a
it's both
combination.
because I think it's good that um, so the technologies need to mature, but also indeed leadership needs to
Yes.
accept the messages that come from there. And I think the better the technology becomes and the better the insights, the easier it is for them to accept things. So I
Mm.
think that should go hand in hand. So and
Yeah.
that's why I'm thinking it's probably yeah.
Sure. I know. Sorry, it's a bit of a hard question to ask.
Mm. Oh,
Apologies for
I'm
that.
in the business of predicting, so it's a good question. But
Yeah, it's true. It's true. The reason I ask that is that I have so many conflicting conversations
yeah.
with people. Some people are saying it's already here and it's now, and we're doing it, and others are saying, you know, it's 10 years away. It's so much, and I can only imagine as a senior HR leader why it's such a not, I wouldn't say a headache, but there's a lot of noise. There's so much noise every
Mm.
day. I'm seeing a new software pop up on my feed, you know, or there's multiple companies now that are obviously investing huge sums of money into the space. And
Yeah. So and I think, sorry to interrupt, but I think on reporting it is there, and not everyone has it implemented. But I think the technologies are there, right? So you can actually, but it's around like, do we actually have the data in one source, and can you actually access, and can you actually have you cleaned it up to do
yes.
high quality reporting? So in that area, it's not around technology; it's around sort of more the circumstances around that
Mhm.
technology. But in the analytics space, I don't think the technology is as supporting as it could be. So that will take some more time. But then you can do it offline a lot. So it's also a story with or a question with whatever, you know, when you say when is it there, I I don't, it depends on what the it is. Yeah.
It's true. It's true. With your own team, of course, you're preparing for the future of this. How are you currently preparing your own team, and in terms of developing your team beneath you and throughout the business?
I try to help them focus on the business needs, to help them focus on high impact projects, to have them help the business drive standardization. So we have come a long way, but we still have to do some work on standardizing. And I think we're facilitating that. So we're not in the place to actually make change. We only provide data, charts, insights, and so we help the transition to evidence-based decision making. That's a nice sentence I like. But
Hmm.
we help, and my team is in a fantastic, cool area where everyone has their eyes fixed on. So they're actually they tend to like to be in that place because it's an area of high demand, and so there's a lot of opportunities, and I want people to play on their strengths, which are, you know, different for everyone in the team. But I think preparing for a future, I think people can become even better, if you like, business partners.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
both towards HR and business, as in
Yeah, no,
operations.
of course,
Yeah,
on both sides,
yeah.
and that's one of the things I was interested in with such a large HR team
Mm.
within Shell, so many different leaders that you have. How are you communicating what you guys are doing in line with the different segments and verticals that you have across the business? Are you managing the HR tech and analytics for the whole organization across all of the
Yes.
different upstream and downstream, etc.?
Yes, so we indeed have a global department. Well, we do our best, and I'm sure you will find
Yeah.
holes in where we reach out. We work through the HR business partners. So indeed, they are actually already at the table with the different businesses and the people that. So they need to reach out to us basically for analytics. They need to reach out and say, like, look, I've got this issue here, and can you actually help? On the reporting, that's much more matured. So we have a much more, we have quarterly reports, and it's a very professional organization already that
Hmm.
is very providing a lot of quarterlies, monthlies, annual annual reports, and then a lot of ad hoc insights to various people in the business. And that's basically. But we serve up to a certain. We serve quite senior stakeholders, all of the team, and there's a lot of business partners in the organization that provide data to the other leaders in the organization.
Have you had to do a lot of training with those business partners to be able to reflect that message back? Is that something that you've been actively involved in?
Yeah,
Because I can
do.
imagine that's quite a big challenge to make sure that the communication is delivered effectively across the lines.
Yeah, so we organize webinars. We are involved in training programs to actually make that happen. Yes, indeed.
Perfect, fantastic. Yeah, well, that leads us quite nicely onto the quick fire round, where I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you have no longer than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers. Are you ready?
Yeah.
What was the number one thing that was holding you back from being a senior leader in your field?
I think it was making the step from to HR, basically. So it was 4 years back when I was asked to join HR. It came out of the blue. I had never considered a career in HR, and I'd actually did some 2-week thinking over. I happened to have a holiday, and I thought, like, what am I going to do in HR? And I decided that the opportunity of impact was too good to decline, and I'm very happy. It's an amazing field to
Fantastic.
To work. Yeah.
What's the best piece of business advice that you've ever received?
That's a difficult one. There's many people who've provided advice over the years, and probably many advice that I haven't followed up on, but yet, I should say. I think very early, basically when I had to choose studies, I was advised to go for a core skill, and actually to go for something I liked, but actually to look for like the core mathematics or core something. And that's something I basically benefit from every day, that it's a clear profile that I have, and that it's clear what value I can add, basically. Yeah.
Fantastic. What's one book that you'd recommend to our audience, and why?
Well, depending on where you come from. So for me, when I came to HR, the Testing People at Work from Mr. and Mrs. Smith was very insightful. It's talks about assessments and how they can actually create data that helps you predict. But then, on the field, there's a few good books. One from, of course, from Laszlo Bock from Google.
Yes.
That one is Work Rules. That one is very entertaining to read. So that one's also one that I would recommend. Yeah.
Fantastic. Could you share one internet resource that you use to increase your productivity?
It's not very original, but it would be LinkedIn.
I think I'm just going to put LinkedIn in there from that one.
Yeah, and the other thing is that the team goes to analytical conferences, ones that are not necessarily focused on HR, but where we can basically get inspired on what happens in the digital world, in marketing or in any other area. And that's where we find that we they're further on the journey of digitalization, and it's cool to see what they do and then think of how you could perhaps steal some ideas for application in HR. Yeah.
Fantastic. And what's one thing that most excites you about your business today?
The business. So it's Shell and HR are both in transition. So I think HR is in transition to evidence-based decision making. That's very cool to contribute to. I feel very much that that analytics is playing a huge role in there. And Shell itself is also in transition to become a more to basically supply energy to a growing world population, and cleaner energy, and that's quite exciting to be part of. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, look, Esther, you've given us some great actionable advice, so I know our members will be a lot better off for it. So thank you very much for joining us. Give our listeners one parting piece of guidance, and then we'll say goodbye.
Well, don't be afraid of analytics. I think that's my one piece of advice. And thanks so much for having me today.
No problem. Well, look, guys, head over to hrdealers.com. There you'll find all of the show notes on the episode, everything we've been talking about, all of the links that we've discussed. Esther, thank you again for sharing your journey with us, and I wish you all the best until we next speak.